Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We've got quite a mix of sources today. Everything from a really troubling air crash investigation, all the way to global climate policy and even how brands talk on social media.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. Our goal, as always, is to give you the key takeaways from these pieces.
Okay, let's start in the editorial section. We have to talk about Air India AI 171. The basic facts are just grim.
Yeah.
June 12, 2025, the flight crashes in Ahmedabad. 241 passengers dead, just one survivor, plus 19 people killed on the ground.
And beyond the terrible human costs, this was huge globally because, well, it was the first ever crash of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
An aircraft with a pretty stellar safety record up until then.
Exactly. Millions of flight hours. And the thing that jumps out technically is dual engine failure on takeoff. That's incredibly rare, almost unheard of in modern aviation.
Right.
So you have this technical mystery, and then you add the delay. The Ministry of Civil Aviation hasn't released the final report, despite the minister promising transparency.
And that delay just lets speculation run wild, doesn't it?
It really does. You see all these theories on social media, electrical problems, software glitches, distracting from, well, what the preliminary data might actually show.
Okay, but here's where it takes a really strange turn. The crash was June 12th. They find the second flight recorder by June 16th. And on that exact day, June 16th, the Home Ministry issues an order. The chief of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, gets X-Category Commando Protection, 247.
Which is extraordinary. You immediately think, what did they find in those first few days? What was on those recorders that triggered such a high-level threat assessment?
I mean, is there any chance this is just a procedure?
Right.
For something this high profile?
It seems unlikely to be standard, especially when you look at the technical side mentioned in the preliminary report. Remember that cryptic pilot conversation? Why did you do that? I did not do that.
Yeah.
Well, the key thing about the 787 is the fuel control switches. They have to be physically lifted off the run gate and then dropped into the cutoff position.
So a person has to do it. Can't just happen because of a glitch.
Precisely. No software command, no electrical fault can move those switches. It has to be a manual action. So those social media theories about glitches, they don't really hold water based on the aircraft design.
Which makes that pilot conversation even more critical. And if it was a manual shutdown, that leads to the absolute basic rule of flying in an emergency, right?
The captain takes over immediately. They have to call my controls. It's drilled into every pilot.
Especially crucial in the 787 because the co-pilot's main instrument panel goes blank if there's a major issue and they're on limited battery power.
Right. The AAIB has expert 787 pilots. They'd know instantly listening to the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, if that crucial My Controls call was missing.
So the lack of that call,
Yeah.
perhaps that's the key fact. The thing maybe someone doesn't want out there. Could that be why the report's delayed and the investigator needs protection?
It certainly raises profound questions about what's being held back.
Okay, moving on, but staying in the editorial section. Let's shift gears to a story about policy success. It's about how the Dravidian model is being applied to sports development in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. The core idea is NotebookLM, basically making public resources accessible to everyone.
So breaking down barriers for young people, especially those in rural areas or smaller towns, stopping them from getting into sports.
Exactly. And the results they're highlighting are pretty compelling. Tamil Nadu already had a strong base, like producing 34 of India's 89 chess grandmasters. That's quite something.
Wow.
But recently, they've seen big successes on the national and international stage, too. 4 Paralympic medalists, 12 Olympians at the Paris Games, and maybe most tellingly, a 20% jump in their medal count at the national games between 2023 and 2025.
Okay, a 20% jump is significant.
Yeah.
That usually points to serious investment.
Absolutely. The numbers are striking. They've allocated 1,945 crore over the last 5 years.
Right.
That's a 143% increase compared to the previous administration. So, yes, serious money.
And where's that money going? Is it just elite athletes?
Not just elites, that's the point. A lot is going into infrastructure. And crucially, spreading it out. 28 new sports complexes, synthetic tracks, but also mini stadia in 75 different blocks. And they made sure 60% of those are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns.
So taking the facilities to where the talent might be rather than making everyone come to Chennai.
Exactly. Plus things like accessible arenas for parasports and the Kalanar Sports Kit Scheme, giving out kits with 33 types of equipment to every single panchayat.
That's grassroots level stuff. But what about long-term support? A sports career can be short.
That's where the social engineering aspect comes in. They revitalized the 3% sports quota for government jobs.
Ah, okay. So a pathway after their sporting peak.
Precisely. Since 2021, 109 athletes have gotten government jobs through this quota. Compare that to only 3 in the 5 years before that.
Huge difference.
Yeah. The article mentions a para-athlete named Manoy. He won medals internationally, was working on a contract basis, and then got a permanent government job through the quota. It provides stability, makes pursuing sports less of a financial gamble. It's a whole pathway.
All right, let's shift now to the science section. We're looking ahead to the COP30 Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil.
A really symbolic location right next to the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, a massive carbon sink holding something like 150 to 200 billion tons of carbon, and we know it's under threat.
So the hope is this location adds urgency. COP30 is being called the implementation COP. The focus is supposed to be on putting plans into action, guided by the global stocktake, the GST.
But implementation needs everyone at the table, right?
Yeah.
And there seems to be a problem right from the start.
A big one. Logistics in Belém are proving really difficult. Hotel prices have apparently gone through the roof.
So potentially pricing out smaller nations, civil society groups.
That's the fear. If delegations from low-income countries or key NGOs can't afford to attend, it really undermines the whole process. It becomes less inclusive, less legitimate.
Okay, so access is an issue, but the core fight at COPs is always about money, isn't it? Climate finance.
Always. We know developed nations failed to deliver that $100 billion a year they promised earlier. So now the focus is on this new target, the new Collective Quantified Goal, or NCQG.
Right, agree to copy 29. What's the target now?
It's aiming for $300 billion annually by 2035, and then scaling up all climate finance, public, private, everything, to $1.3 trillion per year by 2035. But there's a catchphrase, using all actors.
All actors. That
Yeah.
sounds broad. What's the controversy there?
It's the main point of tension. Developing countries argue that relying on all actors, meaning private finance, philanthropy, even their own domestic private sectors, dilutes the core principle of common but differentiated responsibilities.
The idea that richer nations, historically responsible for most emissions, should bear the main financial burden.
Exactly. They feel this lets developed countries off the hook. Plus, even $300 billion is, frankly, nowhere near the trillions actually needed for mitigation and adaptation globally.
And speaking of adaptation, COP30 also needs to figure out the global goal on adaptation, the GGA framework.
Yeah, that's another huge challenge. How do you create a global framework that actually values and integrates local traditional knowledge? Think about India's traditional water harvesting systems, for example. Making that fit into a quantifiable global target is incredibly complex.
So India's role here is pretty significant, leading the G77 plus China group.
Absolutely. India is central to pushing for climate justice and holding developed nations accountable, while also needing finance for its own massive energy transition and development needs. It's a real balancing act. The key takeaway. The new finance goal looks bigger, but that all actors language might mean the actual commitment from developed nations isn't enough.
Okay, let's move to text and context now. This piece looks at food, nutrition, and technology in India, specifically focusing on two things: functional foods and smart proteins.
Right. So functional foods are basically staple foods enriched with extra nutrients like zinc-enriched rice, for example.
And smart proteins, what falls under that?
That's the umbrella term for plant-based alternatives, proteins made through fermentation, and also cultivated meat grown directly from animal cells.
And why is India focusing on these now?
Well, the need is stark. Over a third of children in India are still stunted. We have to move beyond just food security, having enough calories, towards nutritional security.
Meaning getting the right kind of nutrients, balanced diets.
Exactly, and doing it sustainably. We can't just keep scaling up traditional animal farming indefinitely because of the environmental impact. These new approaches offer potential solutions.
Is India making progress in these areas?
It seems so. Both areas are recognized under the national BioE3 policy. We're seeing successful examples of biofortification, that zinc-enriched rice from IRR, iron-rich pearl millet from Icrosot. These are real products reaching people.
And the smart protein market, has that taken off?
It's definitely growing fast. The article mentions 377 different products from over 70 brands were available in 2023. So there's consumer interest and commercial activity.
Okay, sounds promising. But what are the hurdles?
The biggest one seems to be regulation, particularly for the really novel stuff like cultivated meat. The Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, FSSAI, hasn't yet issued clear guidelines.
even though research is happening.
Yeah, the Department of Biotechnology is funding research, but the regulatory pathway isn't clear, and other countries are moving faster. Japan was doing functional foods decades ago. Singapore approved cultivated chicken back in 2020.
So the risk is India falls behind globally.
That's one risk. The other, perhaps more immediate domestic risk, is that without clear regulations from FSAI, you could get a flood of products making claims about being functional or nutritious without proper verification, maybe even unsafe products.
Right, you need standards.
Absolutely. Clear rules are needed now. And crucially, transparent communication. There's often public skepticism about, lab-made food. Building trust is going to be essential for these technologies to actually make a difference.
Sticking with test and context, let's look at this Delhi High Court judgment. In Reese, suicide committed by Sushant Rohilla, 2025. A really tragic case involving a law student.
Yes, the student was barred from exams due to attendance shortage and subsequently died by suicide. The court turned this tragedy into a larger inquiry about fairness in academic institutions.
So what did the court actually rule? Did they strike down attendance rule?
No, interestingly, they upheld the Bar Council of India's 70% attendance requirement, but they strongly objected to how it was being enforced, what they called mechanically.
Meaning just applying the rule rigidly without considering circumstances.
Exactly. The court emphasized that universities are public bodies. They have to follow constitutional principles. Arbitrarily barring a student violates Article 14, the guarantee against arbitrariness, and Article 21, the right to dignity.
So debarment should be a last resort, basically.
A very last resort. The court called it an extreme, disproportionate step.
Okay, so if they can't just apply the rule automatically, what do universities have to do now before debarring someone for attendance?
The judgment lays out clear procedural steps. Mandatory steps, weekly attendance updates to students, monthly shortage notices sent not just to the student, but also their guardians.
So early warnings.
Yes, and mandatory counseling sessions. Plus, universities now have to officially record any medical or mental health issues that might be affecting attendance, and students must get a chance to explain themselves to a grievance redressal committee before any final decision.
It sounds like it forces universities to be more supportive, less like enforcers.
That's the core idea. It mandates institutional change. Universities need to integrate proper counseling. They need these grievance committees. And significantly, they also have to count things like moot courts, internships, legal aid work, experiential learning towards student engagement.
So attendance becomes less about just sitting in a chair and more about actual participation in learning.
Precisely. Shifting from policing to participation.
All right, one more from text and context. This one is about marketing specifically, something called brand anthropomorphism on social media.
Right, giving human characteristics to brands, making corporate accounts talk like people using slang, having opinions, joking around.
Like the example here, Uber using a reference to the painting The Scream on Instagram to promote its membership. Trying to be relatable, I guess.
Exactly. Trying to connect, especially with younger audiences, build engagement. But it's tricky. High risk, high reward.
How so? What's the risk?
Well, you can get it really wrong. The article mentions Amazon Prime Video, India's X account, mocking a user's engagement ring.
Oof, that sounds bad.
It was. The user felt the brand was basically inviting harassment towards them. It shows how fine the line is. You're trying to sound human, but you're still a massive corporation.
And brands even customize these personalities for different regions.
Yeah, they have to. Netflix India South, for example, apparently refers to a specific actor, Silambarasan TR, as its boyfriend in its posts, creating this very specific, localized persona to resonate.
It feels designed to make you forget it's an ad, right? If it feels like a joke from a friend, you might share it.
That's precisely the goal. Blur the line between organic content and advertising. Users reshare it, essentially doing the brand's marketing for free.
But it can backfire badly, especially for certain types of companies.
Definitely. Look at WhatsApp. They made a seemingly harmless joke about people who use lol a lot.
Right.
But it blew up. Millions of views, people asking if WhatsApp was reading their private messages. It brought back all the old privacy concerns.
Right. So for companies handling sensitive data, maybe being relatable isn't the best strategy.
Probably not. Brands like Apple or even Palantir tend to have a much more restrained, professional tone. It aligns better with what they do. Trust is more important than being funny for them.
And the article also mentions brands might use these lighthearted posts strategically.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a way to distract from less positive news, like OpenAI posting playful stories about ChatGPT while simultaneously facing a serious lawsuit about its AI allegedly assisting in a suicide. It's reputation management dressed up as fun content.
Okay, finally, let's turn to the spotlight section. This is a really positive story, focusing on what's described as a quiet revolution in Odisha's tribal areas.
Yes, it's about first-generation learners from tribal communities successfully cracking the NEET exam, the entrance test for medical colleges.
And there are some incredible individual stories here.
Truly inspiring. Like Krishna Chandra Taka, he was a migrant laborer, came back to study after a 15-year gap and cracked NEET in 2023.
Wow, 15 years.
And Mangala Maduli, the first person from the Banda community, which is a particularly vulnerable tribal group, PVTG, to get into medical school.
These are amazing achievements. What's enabling this kind of success? Is it just individual brilliance?
Individual brilliance is part of it, of course, but there's a whole ecosystem being built. Remember, Odisha has a very large tribal population, nearly 23% of the state.
Okay.
So the government has invested heavily in residential schools and hostels specifically for tribal students. There's a network of over 1,700 schools and nearly 6,000 hostels, serving over 500,000 students, mostly in districts with high tribal populations.
So dedicated infrastructure.
Yes. Plus, there's a crucial policy. A 15% reservation for government school students in medical and engineering colleges. That guarantees a pathway if they clear the hurdle.
The article also mentioned something about changing aspirations, that traditionally ambitions were more limited.
Right. It says ambitions might have typically been to become, say, a headmaster or a block development officer, BDO roles, visible within the community. It even mentions people literally being named things like Dr. Pradhan as an aspiration.
So it's changed.
Mentorship plays a big role. Plus, the internet exposing students to wider possibilities. Consciously introducing role models is helping them see that high-level professional careers are achievable for them too. It's a cultural shift.
It sounds fantastic.
What?
Is there a but? Often with these stories, there's another side.
There is a significant but here, unfortunately. Despite these really wonderful success stories, the overall dropout rates for tribal students in secondary and higher secondary school are still alarmingly high, double digits.
So many are still falling through the cracks before they even get a chance to aim for NEET.
Exactly. The article cites figures for Rayagada district dropouts apparently jumped to over 18,000 in 2025-26, and it points to basic infrastructure gaps. One school, Padabai, has only 3 teachers for over 300 students.
3 teachers for 309 students.
Yeah. So while the individual triumphs are incredibly important and inspiring, the systemic challenges ensuring enough teachers, resources, support to keep kids in school remain huge. The foundation needs strengthening for these successes to become the norm, not the exception. Thinking about all these pieces, it makes you reflect. If systems, whether it's the BCI setting rigid attendance rules, or maybe the MOSASI delaying an accident report, if they prioritize how things look over transparency and individual well-being, well, you risk crushing the very kind of ambition and resilience we see in those students from Odisha. It really forces you to ask, where else are we mistaking bureaucratic procedure for genuine accountability, potentially holding people back?
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.